Chapter 2 of The Impossibles. And it had all started so simply, too. Malone remembered very clearly the first time he had had any indication that red Cadillacs were anything unusual or special. Before that, he'd viewed them all with slightly wistful eyes. Red, blue, green, gray, white, or even black Cadillacs were all the same to him. They spelled luxury and wealth and display, and a lot of other nice things. Now he wasn't at all sure what they spelled, except that it was definitely uncomfortable and highly baffling. He'd walked into the offices of Andrew J. Burris, director of the FBI, just 1 week ago. It was a beautiful office, pine-paneled and spacious, and it boasted an enormous polished desk. And behind the desk sat Burris himself, looking both tired and somehow a little kindly. "You sent for me, Chief?" Malone said. "That's right," Burris nodded. "Malone, you've been working too hard lately." Now, Malone thought, it was coming. The dismissal he had always feared. At last, Burris had found out that he wasn't the bright, intelligent, fearless, and alert FBI agent he was supposed to be. Burris had discovered that he was nothing more or less than lucky, and that all the fine jobs he was supposed to have done were only the result of luck. Oh well, Malone thought. Not being an FBI agent wouldn't be so bad. He could always find another job. Only at the moment, he couldn't think of one he liked. He decided to make one last plea. "I haven't been working so hard, Chief," he said. "Not too hard, anyhow. I'm in great shape. I've taken advantage of you, Malone. That's what I've done," Burris said, just as if Malone hadn't spoken at all. "Just because you're the best agent I've got, that's no reason for me to hand you all the tough ones." "Just because I'm what?" Malone said, feeling slightly faint. "I've given you the tough ones because you could handle them," Burris said. "But that's no reason to keep loading jobs on you. After that job you did on the Gorlick kidnapping, and the way you wrapped up the Transom counterfeit ring, well, Malone, I think you need a little relaxation." "Relaxation?" Malone said, feeling just a little bit pleased. Of course, he didn't deserve any of the praise he was getting, he knew. He'd just happened to walk in on the Gorlick kidnappers because his telephone had been out of order, and the transom ring hadn't been just his job. After all, if other agents hadn't managed to trace the counterfeit bills back to a common area in Cincinnati, he'd never have been able to complete his part of the assignment. But it was nice to be praised anyhow. Malone felt a twinge of guilt and told himself sternly to relax and enjoy himself. "That's what I said," Burris told him. "Relaxation." "Well," Malone said, "I certainly would like a vacation, that's for sure. I'd like to snooze for a couple of weeks, or maybe go up to Cape Cod for a while. There's a lot of nice scenery up around there. It's restful, sort of, and I could just—" He stopped. Burris was frowning, and when Andrew J. Burris frowned, it was a good idea to look attentive, interested, and alert. "Now, Malone," Burris said sadly, "I wasn't exactly thinking about a vacation. You're not scheduled for one until August, you know." "Oh, I know, Chief," Malone said, "but I thought—" "Much as I'd like to," Burris said, "I just can't make an exception. You know that, Malone. I've got to go pretty much by the schedule." "Yes, sir," Malone said, feeling just a shade disappointed. "But I do think you deserve a rest," Burris said. "Well, if I—" "Here's what I'm going to do," Burris said, and paused. Malone felt a little unsure as to exactly what his chief was talking about, but by now he knew better than to ask a lot of questions. Sooner or later, Burris would probably explain himself, and if he didn't, then there was no use worrying about it. That was just the way Burris acted. Suppose I give you a chance to take it easy for a while, Burris said. You could catch up on your sleep, see some shows, have a couple of drinks during the evening, take girls out for dinner. You know, something like that. How would you like it? Well, Malone said cautiously. Good, Burris said. I knew you would. Malone opened his mouth, thought briefly, and closed it again. After all, it did sound sort of promising, and if there was a catch in it, he'd find out about it soon enough. It's really just a routine case, Burris said in an offhand tone. Nothing to it. Oh, Malone said. There's this red Cadillac, Burris said. It was stolen from a party in Connecticut, out near Danbury, and it showed up in New York City. Now the car's crossed a state line. That puts it in our jurisdiction, Malone said, feeling obvious. Right, Burris said. Right on the nose. But the New York office? Naturally, they're in charge of everything, Burris said. But I'm sending you out as sort of a special observer. Just keep your eyes open and nose around, and let me know what's happening. Keep my eyes and nose what? Malone said. Open, Burris said, and let me know about it. Malone tried to picture himself with his eyes and nose open, and decided he didn't look very attractive that way. Well, it was only a figure of speech or something. He didn't have to think about it. It really made a very ugly picture. But why a special observer? He said after a second. Burris could read the reports from the New York office and probably get more facts than any single agent could find out just wandering around a strange city. It sounded as if there was something, Malone told himself, just a tiny shade rotten in Denmark. It sounded as if there were going to be something in the nice, easy assignment he was getting that would make him wish he had gone lion hunting in darkest Africa instead. And then again, maybe he was wrong. He stood at ease and waited to find out. Well, Burris said, it is just a routine case, just like I said. But there seems to be something a little bit odd about it. I see, Malone said with a sinking feeling. Here's what's happening, Burris said hurriedly, as if he were afraid Malone was going to change his mind and refuse the assignment. This red Cadillac I told you about was reported stolen from Danbury. 3 days later, it turned up in New York City, parked smack across the street from a precinct police station. Of course, it took them a while to wake up, but one of the officers happened to notice the routine report on stolen cars in the area, and he decided to go across the street and check the license number on the car. Then something funny happened. Something funny? Malone asked. He doubted that, whatever it was going to make him laugh. But he kept his face a careful, receptive blank. That's right, Burris said. Now, if you're going to understand what happened, you've got to get the whole picture. Sure, Malone said. Only, that isn't what I mean, Burris added suddenly. Malone blinked. What isn't what you mean? He said. Understanding what happened, Burris said. That's the trouble. You won't understand what happened. I don't understand it, and neither does anybody else. So what do you think about it? Think about what? Malone said. About what I've been telling you, Burris snapped. This car. Malone took a deep breath. Well, he said, this officer went over to check the license plate. It seems like the right thing to do. It's just what I would have done myself. Sure you would, Burris said. Anyone would. But listen to me. All right, Chief, Malone said. It was just after dawn, early in the morning. Malone wondered briefly if there were parts of the world where dawn came, say, late in the afternoon or during the evening sometime, but he said nothing. The street was deserted, Burris went on. But it was pretty light out, and the witnesses are willing to swear that there was nobody on that street for a block in either direction. Except them, of course. Except who? Malone said. Except the witnesses, Burris said patiently. 4 cops, police officers who were standing on the front steps of the precinct station talking. They were waiting to go on duty, or anyhow, that's what the report said. It's lucky they were there for whatever reason. They're the only witnesses we've got. Burris stopped. Malone waited a few seconds and then said, as calmly as he could, witnesses to what? To this whole business with Sergeant Jukovsky, Burris said. The sudden introduction of a completely new name confused Malone for an instant, but he recovered gamely. Sergeant Jukovsky was the man who investigated the car, he said. That's right, Burris said. Except that he didn't. Malone sighed. Those 4 officers, the witnesses, they weren't paying much attention to what looked like the routine investigation of a parked car, Burris said. But here's their testimony. They were standing around talking when this Sergeant Jukovsky came out of the station, spoke to them in passing, and went on across the street. He didn't seem very worried or alarmed about anything. Good, Malone said involuntarily. I mean, go on, Chief, he added. Ah, Burris said. All right. Well, according to Jukovsky, he took a look at the plate and found the numbers checked the listing he had for a stolen Connecticut car. Then he walked around to take a look inside the car. It was empty. Get that, Malone? The car was empty. Well, Malone said, it was parked. I suppose parked cars are usually empty. What's special about this one? Wait and see, Burris said ominously. Jukovsky swears the car was empty. He tried the doors, and they were all locked but one, the front door on the curbside, the driver's door. So he opened it and leaned over to have a look at the odometer to check the mileage. And something clobbered him on the back of the head. One of the other cops, Malone said. One of the who? Burris said. No, not the cops. Not at all. Then something fell on him, Malone said. Okay. Then whatever fell on him ought to be Malone, Burris said. Yes, Chief? Jukovsky woke up on the sidewalk with the other cops all around him. There was nothing on that sidewalk but Jukovsky. Nothing could have fallen on him. It hadn't landed anywhere, if you see what I mean. Sure, Malone said, but whatever it was, Burris said, they didn't find it. But that isn't the peculiar thing. No? No, Burris said slowly. Now, wait a minute, Malone said. They looked on the sidewalk and around there, but did they think to search the car? They didn't get a chance, Burris said. Anyhow, not then. Not until they got around to picking up the pieces of the car uptown at 125th Street. Malone closed his eyes. Where was this precinct? He said. Midtown, Burris said. In the 40s. And the pieces of the car were 80 blocks away when they searched it, Malone said. Burris nodded. All right, Malone said pleasantly. I give up. Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you, Burris said. According to the witnesses, after Jukovsky fell out of the car, the motor started and the car drove off uptown. Oh, Malone said. He thought about that for a minute and decided at last to hazard one little question. It sounded silly, but then what didn't? The car just drove off all by itself, he said. Burris seemed abashed. Well, Malone, he said carefully, That's where the conflicting stories of the eyewitnesses don't agree. You see, two of the cops say there was nobody in the car. Nobody at all. Of any kind, small or large. And the other two? Malone said. The other two swear they saw somebody at the wheel, Burris said. But they won't say whether it was a man, a woman, a small child, or an anthropoid ape. And they haven't the faintest idea where he, she, or it came from. Great, Malone said. He felt a little tired. His trip was beginning to sound less and less like a vacation. Those two cops swear there was something, or somebody, driving the car, Burris said. And that isn't all. It isn't? Malone said. Burris shook his head. A couple of the cops jumped into a squad car and started following the red Cadillac. One of those cops saw somebody in the car when it left the curb. The other one didn't. Got that? I've got it, Malone said, but I don't know exactly what to do with it. Just hold on to it, Burris said, and listen to this. The cops were about 2 blocks behind at the start, and they couldn't close the gap right away. The Cadillac headed west and climbed up the ramp of the West Side Highway, heading north, out toward Westchester. I'd give a lot to know where they were going, too. But they crashed, Malone said, remembering that the pieces were at 125th Street. So, they didn't crash right away, Burris said. The prowl car started gaining on the Cadillac slowly. And, now get this, Malone, both the cops swear there was somebody in the driver's seat now. Wait a minute, Malone said. One of those cops didn't see anybody at all in the driver's seat when the car started off. Right, Burris said. But on the West Side Highway, he did see a driver, Malone said. He thought for a minute. Hell, it could happen. They took off so fast he could have been confused, or something. There's another explanation, Burris said. Sure, Malone said cheerfully. We're all crazy. The whole world is crazy. Not that one, Burris said. I'll tell you when I finish with this thing about the car itself. There isn't much description of whoever or whatever was driving that car on the West Side Highway, by the way, in case you were thinking of asking. Malone, who hadn't been thinking of asking anything, tried to look clever. Burris regarded him owlishly for a second, and then went on. The car was hitting it up to about 110 by this time, and accelerating all the time. But the souped-up squad car was coming on fast, too, and it was quite a chase. Luckily, there weren't many cars on the road. Somebody could have been killed, Malone. Like the driver of the Cadillac, Malone ventured. Burris looked pained. Not exactly, he said. Because the car hit the 125th Street exit like a bomb. It swerved right, just as though it were going to take the exit and head off somewhere, but it was going much too fast by that time. There just wasn't any way to maneuver. The Cadillac hit the embankment, flipped over the edge, and smashed. It caught fire almost at once. Of course, the prowl car braked fast and went down the exit after it. But there wasn't anything to do. That's what I said, Malone said. The driver of the Cadillac was killed in a fire like that. Don't jump to conclusions, Malone, Burris said. Wait. When the prowl car boys got to the scene, there was no sign of anybody in the car. Nobody at all. In the heat of those flames, Malone began. Not enough heat and not enough time, Burris said. A human body couldn't have been destroyed in just a few minutes, not that completely. Some of the car's metal was melted, sure, but there would have been traces of anybody who had been in the car. Nice, big, easily seen traces. And there weren't any. No corpse, no remains, no nothing. Malone let that stew in his mind for a few seconds. But the cops said, Whatever the cops said, Burris snapped, there was nobody at all in that Cadillac when it went off the embankment. Now wait a minute, Malone said. Here's a car with a driver who appears and disappears practically at will. Sometimes he's there, and sometimes he's not there. Ah, Burris said. That's why I have another explanation. Malone shifted his feet. Maybe there was another explanation, but, he told himself, it would have to be a good one. Nobody expects a car to drive itself down a highway, Burris said. That's right, Malone said. That's why it's all impossible. So, Burris said, it would be a natural hallucination, or illusion anyhow, for somebody to imagine he did see a driver when there wasn't any. Okay, Malone said. There wasn't any driver, so the car couldn't have gone anywhere. So the New York police force is lying to us. It's a good explanation, but they aren't lying, Burris said. Why should they? I'm thinking of something else. He stopped, his eyes bright as he leaned across the desk toward Malone. Do I get 3 guesses? Malone said. Burris ignored him. Frankly, he said, I've got a hunch that the whole thing was done with remote control. Somewhere in that car was a very cleverly concealed device that was capable of running the Cadillac from a distance. It did sound plausible, Malone thought. Did the prowl car boys find any traces of it when they examined the wreckage? He said. Not a thing, Burris said. But after all, it could have been melted. The fire did destroy a lot of the Cadillac, and there's just no telling. But I'd give long odds that there must have been some kind of robot device in that car. It's the only answer, isn't it? I suppose so, Malone said. Malone, Burris said, his voice filled with devotion to one's country in the face of great obstacles. Malone, I want you to find that device. In the wreck? Malone said. Burris sighed and leaned back. No, he said, of course not. Not in the wreck. But the other red Cadillacs, some of them anyhow, ought to have. What red Cadillacs? Malone said. The other ones that have been stolen. From Connecticut mostly. One from New Jersey, out near Passaic. Have any of the others been moving around without drivers? Malone said. Well, Burris said, there's been no report of it, but who can tell? He gestured with both arms. Anything is possible, Malone. Sure, Malone said. Now, Burris said, all of the stolen cars are red 1972 Cadillacs. There's got to be some reason for that. I think they're covering up another car like the one that got smashed, a remote-controlled Cadillac, or even a self-guiding, automatic, robot-controlled Cadillac. They? Malone said. Who? Whoever is stealing the cars, Burris said patiently. Oh, Malone said. Sure, but so get up to New York, Burris said. Keep your eyes open and nose around. Got it? I have now, Malone said. And when that Cadillac is found, Malone, we want to take a look at it, okay? Yes, sir, Malone said. Of course there were written reports, too. Burris had handed Malone a sheaf of them, copies of the New York police reports to Burris himself, and Malone, wanting some time to look through them, had taken a train to New York instead of a plane. Besides, the new plane still made him slightly nervous, though he could ride one when he had to. If jet engines had been good enough for the last generation, he thought, they were certainly good enough for him. But avoidance of the new planes was all the good the train trip did him. The reports contained thousands of words, none of which was either new or, apparently, significant to Malone. Burris, he considered, had given him everything necessary for the job. Except, of course, a way to make sense out of the whole thing. He considered robot-controlled Cadillacs. What good were they? They might make it easier for the average driver, of course, but that was no reason to cover up for them, hitting policemen over the head and smashing cars and driving 110 miles an hour on the West Side Highway. All the same, it was the only explanation Malone had, and he cherished it deeply. He put the papers back in his briefcase when the train pulled into Penn Station, handed his suitcases to a redcap, and punched the buttons for the waiting room. Now, he thought as he strolled slowly along behind the robot, there was an invention that made sense, and nobody had to get killed for it, or hit over the head, or smashed up, had they? So what was all this nonsense about robot-controlled red Cadillacs? Driving these unwelcome reflections from his mind, he paused to light a cigarette. He had barely taken the first puff when a familiar voice said, "Hey, buddy, hold the light, will you?" Malone looked up, blinked, and grinned happily. "Boyd," he said, "what are you doing here? I haven't seen you since—" "Sure haven't," Boyd said. "I've been out west on a couple of cases. Must be a year since we worked together." "Just about," Malone said. "But what are you doing in New York? Vacationing?" "Not exactly," Boyd said. "The chief called it sort of a vacation, but—" "Oh," Malone said. "You're working with me." Boyd nodded. "The chief sent me up. When I got back from the West, he suddenly decided you might need a good assistant, so I took the plane down and got here ahead of you." "Great," Malone said. "But I want to warn you about the vacation." "Never mind," Boyd said, just a shade sadly. "I know, it isn't." He seemed deep in thought, as if he were deciding whether or not to get rid of Anne Boleyn. It was, Malone thought, an unusually apt simile. Boyd, 6 feet tall and weighing about 225 pounds, had a large, square face and a broad-beamed figure that might have made him a dead ringer for Henry VIII of England, even without his Henry-like fringe of beard and his mustache. With them, thanks to the recent FBI rule that agents could wear facial hair at the discretion of the director or such board as he may appoint, the resemblance to the Tudor monarch was uncanny. But, like his famous double, Boyd didn't stay sad for long. "I thought I'd meet you at the station," he said, cheering up, "and maybe talk over old times for a while on the way to the hotel, anyhow, so long as there wasn't anything else to do." "Sure," Malone said. "It's good to see you again. And when did you get pulled out of the Frisco office?" Boyd grimaced. "You know," he said, "I had a good thing going for me out there. Agent in charge of the entire office. But right after that job we did together, the Queen Elizabeth affair, Burris decided I was too good a man to waste my fragrance on the desert air, or whatever it is. So he recalled me, assigned me from the Home Office, and I've been on one case after another ever since." "You're a Home Office agent now?" Malone said. "I'm a roving reporter," Boyd said, and struck a pose. "I'm a general troubleshooter and a Mr. Fix-It, just like you, hero." "Thanks," Malone said. "How about the local office here? Seen the boys yet?" Boyd shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "I was waiting for you to show up. But I did manage hotel rooms. A couple of rooms with a connecting bath over at the Hotel New Yorker. Nice place. You'll like it, Ken." "I'll love it," Malone said, "especially that connecting bath. It would have been terrible to have an unconnecting bath. Sort of distracting." "Okay," Boyd said. "Okay, you know what I mean." He stared down at Malone's hand. "You know, you still got your lighter on," he added. Malone looked down at it and shut it off. "You asked me to hold it," he said. "I didn't mean indefinitely," Boyd said. "Anyhow, how about grabbing a cab and heading on down to the hotel to get your stuff away? before we check in at 69th Street. Good idea, Malone said. And besides, I could do with a clean shirt, not to mention a bath. Trains get worse and worse, Boyd said absently. Malone punched the red cap's buttons again, and he and Boyd followed it through the crowded station to the taxi stand. The robot piled the suitcases into the cab, and somehow Malone and Boyd found room for themselves. Hotel New Yorker, Boyd said grandly. The driver swung around to stare at them, blinked, and finally said, "Okay, Mac, you said it." He started with a terrific grinding of gears, drove out of the Penn Station arch, and went 2 blocks. "Here you are, Mac," he said, stopping the cab. Malone stared at Boyd with a reproachful expression. "So how was I to know?" Boyd said. "I didn't look. If I'd known it was so close, we could have walked." "And saved $50, Malone said. "But don't let it bother you. This is expense account money." "That's right," Boyd said. He beamed and tipped the driver heavily. The car drove off, and Malone hailed the New Yorker doorman, who equipped them with a robot bellhop and sent them upstairs to their rooms. 3/4 of an hour later, Boyd and Malone were in the offices of the Federal Bureau of Investigation on East 69th Street. There, they picked up a lot of nice, new, shiny facts. It was unfortunate, if not particularly surprising, that the facts did not seem to make any sense. In the first place, only red 1972 Cadillacs seemed to be involved. Anybody who owned such a car was likely to find it missing at any time. There had been a lot of thefts reported, including some that hadn't had time to get into Burris's reports. New Jersey now claimed 2 victims, and New York had 3 of its own. And all the cars weren't turning up in New York by any means. Some of the New York cars had turned up in New Jersey. Some had turned up in Connecticut, including one of the New Jersey cars. So far, there had been neither thefts nor discoveries in Pennsylvania, but Malone couldn't see why. There was absolutely no pattern that he, Boyd, or anyone else could find. The list of thefts and recoveries had been fed into an electronic calculator, which had neatly regurgitated them without being in the least helpful. It had been remarked that the square of 7 was 49, but this was traced to a defect in the mechanism. Whoever was borrowing the red caddies exhibited a peculiar combination of burglarious genius and what looked to Malone like outright idiocy. This was plainly impossible. Unfortunately, it had happened. Locking the car doors didn't do a bit of good. The thief, or thieves, got in without so much as scratching the lock. This obviously proved that the criminal was either an extremely good lockpick or else knew where to get duplicate keys. However, the ignition was invariably shorted across. This proved neatly that the criminal was not a very good lockpick and did not know where to get duplicate keys. Query: why work so hard on the doors and not work at all on the ignition? That was the first place. The second place was just what had been bothering Malone all along. There didn't seem to be any purpose to the car thefts. They hadn't been sold or used as getaway cars. True, teenage delinquents sometimes stole cars just to use them joyriding or some sort of prank. But a car or 2 every night? How many joyrides can one gang take? Malone thought. And how long does it take to get tired of the same prank? And why, Malone asked himself wearily for what was beginning to feel like the 10,000th time, why only red Cadillacs? Burris, he told himself, must have been right all along. The red Cadillacs were only a smokescreen for something else. Perhaps it was the robot car, perhaps not. But whatever it was, Burris's general answer was the only one that made any sense at all. That should have been a comforting thought, Malone reflected. Somehow, though, it wasn't. After they had finished with the files and personnel at 69th Street, Malone and Boyd started downtown on what turned out to be a sort of unguided tour of the New York Police Department. They spoke to some of the eyewitnesses and ended up in Center Street asking a lot of reasonably useless questions in the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. In general, they spent nearly 6 hours on the affair of the self-propelled Cadillac, picking up a whole bundle of facts. Some of the facts they'd already known. Some were new, but unhelpful. Somehow, nobody felt much like going out for a night on the town. Instead, both agents climbed wearily into bed, thinking morose and disillusioned thoughts. And, after that, a week passed. It was filled with ennui. Only one new thing became clear. In spite of the almost identical modus operandi used in all the car thefts, they were obviously the work of a gang rather than a single person. This required the assumption that there was not one insane man at work, but a crew of them, all identically unbalanced. But the jobs are just too scattered to be the work of one man, Malone said. To steal a car in Connecticut and drive it to the Bronx and then steal another car in Westfield, New Jersey 15 minutes later takes more than talent. It takes an outright for sure magician. This conclusion, while interesting, was not really helpful. The fact was that Malone needed more clues, or anyhow more facts, before he could do anything at all. And there just weren't any new facts around. He spent the week wandering morosely from one place to another, sometimes accompanied by Thomas Boyd and sometimes all alone. Time, he knew, was ticking by at its usual rate, but there wasn't a thing he could do about it. He did try to relax and have some fun, as Burris had suggested, but he didn't seem to be able to get his mind off the case. Boyd, after the first little while, had no such trouble. He entered the social life of the city with a whoop of joy and disappeared from sight. That was fine for Boyd, Malone reflected, but it did leave Malone himself just a little bit at loose ends. Not that he begrudged Boyd his fun. It was nice that one of them was enjoying himself anyway. It was just that Malone was beginning to get fidgety. He needed to be doing something, even if it were only taking a walk. So he took a walk and ended up, to his own surprise, downtown near Greenwich Village. And then he had been bopped on the head. End of Chapter 2. Read by Paul Hampton.